Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me at this session at Ignite. My name is Celso Philip, and I'm a cloud advocate here at Microsoft. And in this session, we're going to be talking about some programming essentials for beginners. And what we'll be doing is using the Python programming language to kind of walk you through it. Now, when I was designing this session, I really wanted to focus on that getting started experience for folks that are new to technology and are really new to the world of programming. But if you're familiar with other languages and maybe you kind of just wanted to see what the beginner experience is like, if you're completely new, or maybe you just kind of wanted to get a refresher, hopefully we'll have something that kind of helps everyone along. Now, let's talk about what we're going to be doing for the next few minutes or so. Now, I really want us to start off talking about, well, what is computer science? Because I think understanding computer science is essential for us to understand the role that it plays when we start to talk about programming. We're also going to talk about like what are computers good at, and also how can we start communicating with computers with using programming as the way that we do that. But essentially, at the end of the session, there's a couple of things I want you to get out of it, and that is one, learning a program doesn't have to be really hard. And two, Python is a great language for you to get started with, and hopefully you'll see that by the time we get through this. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get to it? So what is the purpose of computer science, right? And I think this is very important for us to really understand. Now, depending on where you are in your journey, you might have some preconceived ideas about what this is or what computer science actually means. Well, I'm going to give you Cecil's definition of what computer science is. Now, for me, computer science is really about how we could share information between two places, right? Between two people, between two machines, between one place and another place. If you think about everything that you do with your devices, with your phones, your tablets, with all the technology that we have around us, it's really about sharing information. How can I take the ideas that are in my head and give them to you, whether you be right next to me or in the same house or maybe somewhere else across the world? If you think about computer science and just the world of computing in general, there's so many different facets and categories inside of it. We can think about databases, security. We can think about machine learning. We can think about web development and mobile development, all of these different types of things. But ultimately, it's about sharing information, right? How can I get my research to you? How can I let you know, how to call this Uber or how to, do some of these different things using the technology that we have. Now, here's something that may surprise some of you. Computers by themselves aren't really that smart. Now, at the end of the day, they're really just a piece of metal, really, that's sitting on your desk or on your phone or whatever the case is. And without people, computers really don't mean much. So at the end of the day, computers need people, just in the same way as people need people too. So as we think about computers and we're going down this journey to really try and understand software development and computing in general, always have in your minds that computers really exist for the betterment of society and to help us, be more efficient at some of the things that we're really good at. Now, even though I said that, computers are still pretty good at a couple of things, right? They're really good at doing work very quickly, right? Which I think is a huge benefit to us. They're really good at storing and retrieving information, right? We talked a little bit just a while ago about like how I can share and, give information to different folks using computing. And also, well, they're really great at communicating with each other. When you think about, how the internet works, right? Like we're talking about a collection of computers that's spread all across the world. And not only do they communicate really well with each other, but by default, they also help us to communicate with each other in a lot more efficient ways as well. Now, let's talk about how exactly we talk to these computers, right? Like we have to be able to tell these computers, how is it, I want you to carry out certain tasks, or I want you to do the things that are really going to be able to help us. And that's where programming comes into play, right? Using various languages, and there's tons of them. Using various programming languages, we can give the computer what are called instructions, right? And these instructions will let them know, well, this is exactly how I want you to execute something, how I want you to do it, and when I want you to do it, right? And the great thing about this industry is that there's so many different choices for you to choose from when it comes to picking a programming language, right? Maybe I want to do gaming. There's languages that are really good at that. If I want to do data exploration and machine learning, there's languages that are really good at that too. If I want to build websites or mobile apps, or again, looking at all the different things that we can do with computers, there are languages that are also very specific to that as well. Now, what I want to do in this session, we're going to dive into the Python programming language. And there's a couple of tools that we're going to need before we get started. So specifically, these are what we're going to use in this session. We're going to be using Visual Studio Code, which is our free open source editor that you could download and get started with today. Runs on Windows, runs on Mac OS, and tons of other OSs. We're also going to be using Python. Specifically, I'm going to be using Python 3.6 and above. So anything that you see me do here, you should be able to do it in that version of Python. And Python is also free and open source too. So, so far, like, you're not going to have to spend any money or, have to run any really expensive hardware to get started with some of these tools. The next thing that we're going to take a look at using is called the Python extension for Visual Studio Code. Now, this is also freely available, and it's an extension that you can install in VS Code that'll make your Python experience that much better. Now, with that being said, why don't we head over to Visual Studio Code, and I want to show you how we can get started with programming, and also some of the fundamentals and essentials that are important for you to know as you get started in your journey. So I'm going to head over to Visual Studio Code. Now, I've already installed the Python extension for VS Code. If you haven't done this yet or don't know where to find it, in your taskbar on the right side, you can click on this Extensions tab, and then you could type Python. And then probably the first one that you see, right? Python, and it says Microsoft here. This is the extension that you want to make sure that you have installed. Now, once I have that Python extension installed, now I'm going to be able to start writing Python code and doing lots of cool stuff. Now, what you're going to see me doing here is I have a file open, and you might see something that says Programming Essentials IPYNB. Now, this is a notebook file. And if you're not familiar with what notebooks are, it's a really cool technology that allows us to mix together things like Markdown. So you're going to see me write a little bit of Markdown here, and code. So it's really, it's essentially a notebook, right? Like in every sense of the word. But instead of a notebook that's on your desk and table where you actually write notes in, this is a notebook that's on your computer. So I can mix text and some code, and I can kind of experiment in it and understand, well, what are these sections for, and what does this code do? I could run code and I could write notes in the same place, which I think is really cool. Now, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is variables. So here I'm going to write a little bit of Markdown, right? And let's start looking at Python and seeing how we could execute some of these things. So I want my code to be at the bottom, so I'm going to click this plus button here. Now, when you think about variables, variables are essentially places for us to kind of put stuff, right? It's where we store things inside of the world of programming. And regardless of whether we're talking about Python or any other language, most languages have the concept of a variable. So here, for instance, I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it box, right? Like you can imagine you have a shipping box or an envelope or anything that you store stuff in, right? And now I'm going to give it a value. So that equal sign is just me saying, hey, I want you to create a box for me, and I want you to put stuff in the box. And that's essentially what I've done, right? I'm using this variable to store some information. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look inside the box, right? If you give me a box, I might want to know what's inside of it, right? And so we do that with the print statement. So I'm going to go ahead and print that. And at the bottom, inside of my notebook, you should see it prints exactly what's inside of the box. Now, this might seem very simple and very straightforward, but there's a lot of interesting things that are happening here. First, you might notice, one, I'm able to store retrieve information from this variable. Also, I want you to pay attention to the type of information that I'm putting inside of it. Variables come and can store different types of information. In this case, I'm storing what's called a string, which is just a collection of characters, right? Think about like sentences or paragraphs, or you're telling someone a story, right? Like that's what you'd use strings for. Another thing I could do is, well, I could put things, I can create variables that hold numbers. So let's say I had something like 2 apples and I don't know, let's say I had 3 oranges. These are different types of variables, right? Not only are their names different, but they're also storing different types of values. So notice I have apples and oranges. Now, one of the things that we often want to do with variables is not just store information, but sometimes we want to carry out operations on them. So that means that I want to actually do stuff with these variables. So here's an example of how I could say, well, how many fruits do I have? I can say I have apples plus oranges, all right? And now when I do that, I've now created another variable that holds the results of this operation, right? I've taken 2 variables together, the apples on the left side, oranges on the right side, and I've kind of just, done some math, right? Which I think is really cool. And Python's a really great language for you to experiment and do math in. Oops, typed the wrong thing. This should have been fruits. There we go. And there you see how we can create different variables. We could store different types of values in them. And then also you'll notice how we can create operations and we can carry out different things using these variables inside of Python. Now, the next thing I want us to talk about is lists, right? Like inside of most programming languages, you're going to have the concept of data structures. Now, data structures are really just ways that we could store collections of different, values. So let's say I have more than one type of value that I want to store, right? Let's say I have, let's say I have ingredients, right? I want to create a list because I want to store more than one string in there, or maybe even more than one number. So let's create a list of ingredients. Now, I know most of us are home and, if you're like me, you've been experimenting with a lot of different things during the pandemic. And one of the things I've been doing is I've been creating pies with my son. So we've been doing that a lot. So, one of the things that we've been doing whenever we create our shopping list is, we have a list of things to make pies. So I might have things like, eggs, milk, sugar, flour, some of these types of things, right? But essentially what I've done here, now I've created a list. So instead of just holding one value, I have a collection of values. There's 4 different things inside of my list. But just like we were doing before, right? It's a variable just like the ones that we saw in the previous section that I was writing. So here when I print it out, I can see the different things that are inside of my list, right? Now, let's say I actually really wanted to make a pie, right? I wanted to make an apple pie. But you notice I don't have any apple pie in my current list of ingredients. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create another list that's going to be my order, right? Like I want to go to my store or my grocery store down the street or somewhere, and I want to order some additional things that I can put in there. So let's say I want to get some apples, I want to get some cinnamon, right? And now I have an order, right? So I want to add these things to my list of ingredients so we could start making our pie. So one of the things that I could do if I wanted to add these ingredients to my pie is, well, I could say ingredients is equal to the order, right? So these are going to be the things that I ordered from, wherever I got them from. And then now I'm going to add them to my current set of ingredients, right? So what's going to happen if you kind of walk through it, the programming language, particularly in this case, it's Python, is going to execute the things that are on the right side. So the right side of the equal sign is this, right? Like it's going to say order plus ingredients. It's going to take this value and it's going to assign that value to the same variable that we have here, right? So what do you think is going to look like after we're done, right? Like let's run this and see what it does. And as you can see here, apples and cinnamon are put in front. So they're the first 2 items in my list. And then I have the remainder of my list that I had before, right? Now, the main thing I want you to see here is 1, I can create a data structure that holds multiple things inside of it, but then also 2, I can go ahead and carry out those operations, very similar to how we did when we're just looking at plain old variables. Okay, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move on and we're going to talk about conditionals. So conditionals are a really interesting thing inside a world of programming. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit more markdown so we could, keep track of what we're doing. Right, so we're going to be talking about conditionals now. And I'm going to add a code block, right? We're going to keep working through this code block. Now, when you're doing programming, sometimes as you're writing your instructions, you're telling your application what you want it to do. Well, you have to sometimes make a choice, right? Do I want to go right or left? Do I want to go up or down, right? Do I want to select this one or that one? And that's where conditionals kind of come into play. Now, in Python, there's a few ways that you could do it. The one way that I'm going to show you how to do it is with the if statement. So let's say I did something like if apples, as an example, is greater than oranges. Now, you might be saying, well, where did this come from? Well, if you recall, I defined apples and oranges up here, right? I have 2 apples and 3 oranges, right? And they're assigned to these variables. Now, if I say if apples are greater than oranges, then I want to print something, right? Like if that is true, if this expression is true, I want you to do something. So what do I want you to do? I want you to say print. I need to come back one a little bit. Let's take this out. There we go. I want you to print. Let's say we just print, I don't know, apples are bigger, right? That's not the case, but you understand what I'm saying. If that's not the case, I'll say else, right? If that's not the case, I want you to print oranges are bigger. right? So as you can imagine, again, apples has a value in it, oranges has a value in it. And then when we run it, we're going to be able to make a choice, right? Like your application or your code that you're writing is going to look at these variables, is going to inspect these values, and it's going to make a choice, right? Do I want to go right or left? Do I want to go up or down? What's the right thing that I want to be able to do? And so this essentially is one of the ways that we could use conditionals in our code. Let's see how we could use conditionals when we're talking about working with lists. So one of the things you might want to do when you have a list of things is you might want to say, well, what is inside of our list? Like, what does it contain? What is inside of our data structure? So maybe I want to say something like this, like if eggs in ingredients, right? And if you remember, ingredients was defined in our previous section here, right? So this is where it's coming from. And ingredients has in apples, cinnamon, milk, flour, eggs, and sugar. Now, what I'm saying here in this conditional expression is, well, if there are eggs in ingredients, then, well, I want you to remove them. So I'm going to say ingredients dot remove. And then I want you to remove eggs. So there's a couple things happening here that I think we should explain. First off, you see how we can use in as an operator of that's pretty much just saying inclusion. Like, do you have this inside of this collection, right? Is eggs a value that's inside of this list? And if it's true, then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to print out, or I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove eggs because I don't know, maybe whoever you're making the desserts for doesn't like eggs, right? Maybe they have an allergy or something of the sort. So if that's the case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove these things. Now, the way I'm going to remove it is by calling an operation on ingredients, right? Ingredients is a type of list like we saw earlier, but then I can also carry out different operations on them. And one of the things is remove. So I'm going to go ahead and remove a value from that list, right? And so once I remove it, let's go ahead and print it back out and see what's the remainder of it. Like let's see what's left after we've gone ahead and we've done that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to run this code block, right? You notice it still says oranges are bigger, which is, that's this part of the code at the top that it was running. But then also notice I have apples, cinnamon, milk, flour, and sugar, but there's no eggs, right? And that's because, again, I'm able to manipulate lists of things and carry out operations on them. And one of the things I could do is I could remove things. I could also add things. I could, I could combine other lists. I can concatenate lists together like we saw a little bit earlier. And then we can do tons of other things. We could search, we could sort. Let's imagine like I had a contact list and a list of names. Maybe I wanted them to be sorted by a particular order or sorted by a particular length. Like you have tons of different options of things that you could do when you're talking about working with lists. But the important part I want you to see here is that now we have the ability to make a choice, right? And having choice is important as we talk about programming. I could choose the path that I want to take based on what we like to call the state of our program. Right. So in this case, our state is oranges are bigger because oranges has a bigger number than apples. And two, at the time I had eggs inside of my ingredients, and now I went ahead and removed them. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the in the question area, and our moderators will be able to answer some of those for you as we kind of go along as well. Okay, so let's keep moving forward. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about, which I think is really important in programming, is about functions and algorithms. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another section here. I'm just going to call this functions. Right. And let's collapse some of this code so I can have a little bit more screen real estate. Now, here, let's add this code block. Okay. Now, when we think about functions, let's say now I've written a bunch of code, right? I have variables, I have conditionals, I have lists of things, and I have some type of workflow that I want to execute, right? I have some tasks that I want to do. Well, there's a couple of things that we could do. I could either write all those lines of code sequentially, like one after the other, like, do 1, do 2, do 3, do 4, but then what happens if I need to use it again? What happens if I need to call it at a different part of my application for whatever case? What happens if I want to share it with someone and give them that code? Well, one of the things that makes it a little bit easier for us to organize our application and organize our code and kind of promote the reuse of code and not repeating ourselves all the time is being able to use functions. Now in Python, we define functions like this. We use the def keyword, then we give the function a name. So let's say, for kicks and giggles, the name of our function is recipe, right? Then we're going to make a little bit of an indentation, and everything inside of that indentation is going to be part of that function, again in Python. If you're looking at other programming languages, you'll have to figure out, well, what's their way of doing it, but this is how we do it in the world of Python. So I've defined a recipe. Now, I guess what we want to do is we want to start putting together our pie, right? Like, I think that makes sense. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an empty variable, right? Like I'm going to create a pie. There's nothing inside of my pie right now. But what we want to do is I want to take all those ingredients that we had, and then I want to go through all of them, right? And I want to combine them together to make a pie, if that makes sense. So one of the things that we could do in programming languages is we can do looping. So loops are ways that we can kind of go through each item inside of a list. So in this case, we're going to go through each item that's inside of our ingredients. And what do we want to do with them? Well, we want to add them to the pie, right? So I want to say pie is equal to item, right? Oh, I'm sorry. I want to say pie. There we go. Pie is equal to item plus pie. Right? Can we do this? Let's see if we can do this. I want to continually go through and I want to add items to my pie. Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. I'm sorry. I apologize. There we go. This is supposed to be a string. There we go. Right? So pie is a string, right? And everything inside of my list of ingredients is a string. Now I want to go through each of these things and I want to put them in here. So I've done that. Now, the last piece that I want to do is I want to go ahead and print out my pie, right? Because at the end of my recipe, I should have a pie, right? Like that's the whole point. Now, how do we run this function? Well, if I hit this run button here in the notebook, like what's going to happen? Well, nothing happens, right? Like I didn't print anything out. So, well, we got to figure this out, right? Like how do we actually run this function? Well, in Python, what we could do is we can actually type the name of the function with open and closed brackets. And doing that lets Python know, well, this thing is a function. I want to go ahead and run it. Now, if you notice, as we write that out, like that's a little hard to understand, right? Like it says sugar, flour, milk, cinnamon, apples. Like that's not, that's probably not what we want to do. So let's do something else. Let's change our algorithm, right? Our algorithm is, in our case, the steps and instructions that we're creating to complete a particular task. So far, our algorithm for our pie wasn't really good. Let's create another one. Instead of us putting them all together, why don't we go ahead and print them out? So instead, I'll say adding item, right? Whatever the item is in the list to our pie. Okay, let's do that instead. Let's run it. And that's a little bit better, right? Now we see apples, adding apples to our pie, cinnamon, milk, flour, and all these types of things. And essentially what we've done in this case is we've created an algorithm. And our algorithm, like we said before, is the series of steps that we're going to do to make sure that we could achieve a particular goal. Now we head back to the slides really quickly. Now algorithms come in different shapes and sizes. And I think it's always important for us to try and understand not just what we're trying to do, but how we're trying to do it. Right? Like, again, like we said before, computers are for people and computers are no good by themselves, right? Computers are for people and people need people, right? Software is for the betterment and, the enhancement of society. So a lot of the times we have to make sure that as we're creating algorithms and we're doing things that we're thinking about other people as well. I'll give you an example like I like to use with folks. So imagine I built a house, right? I got a raise, got a brand new house, amazing. And I want to invite my friends over to this house. Well, what happens if, I'm having a party and I've invited all these folks over, but for whatever reason, like my friends can't come in the house. And they can't come in the house because the entrance wasn't designed for them. The door's too big or it's too small or it's too skinny or whatever the case is. And it's uncomfortable for them to come in the house. And well, now you feel bad, right? Like you've done all of this work to create this amazing house and you want to share it with your friends, but you can't do it. Because at that moment, like you weren't really thinking about other people, right? So that algorithm is broken. And that's the same way when we think about machine learning algorithms as an example that, sometimes whether we're doing, image recognition, facial recognition, trying to find people. I know a lot of the times on my phone, I'll have voice to text on and I'm texting people and, I'm not American and I have a little bit of an accent that comes out sometimes and the voice to text freaks out and says something that I really didn't mean to say, right? In these cases, we really need to think about people as we're creating our algorithms, right? We need to think about how is it that we're using computers to really help and benefit all of us in society. Now, another thing that folks always ask too, as they're going down their path and they're learning to become good programmers, is well, how do I become a good programmer, right? Like, how do I get better and enhance things? And one of the things I always tell folks is it's always important, whatever you do, to have passion behind it. Passion is so important. When you have passion for something, like that's going to be the thing that's going to keep you driving forward. One of the things I always like to tell folks is, if you want to practice and become better at something, try and relate it to something that you have already existing today. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you like knitting, or maybe you like playing sports, maybe you like basketball, maybe you like gardening, or maybe you like cooking, maybe you like making apple pies like I do, right? Try and figure out a way is how can I represent this thing or add programming to it to help it, help me be more efficient, help my family be more efficient, help the people around you and your community be more efficient. And so that way, one, you'll be teaching yourself some new skills, but then two, also creating something that you could share and will benefit some of the other folks that are around you, which I think is amazing. So before we go, I know we're running low on time, is I definitely want to give you all some homework to do. And so this is my task. As you all are going down your journey, whether you're learning Python or JavaScript or C# or any other of those programming languages, I want you to think about what are some things that I could create that really help, make things around me better? What are some of the things that I have in my home, at my school, in my community that I could use to enhance the programming? Maybe it's creating something for, again, your sports club or your league, or, maybe you have an online group that you want to create registrations for. Maybe, some of these things could really be useful if you'd be able to add a little bit of programming to it. Now, that's pretty much all we have for today. Before you leave, I want to definitely give a quick shout out to my coworker, Chloe. She's going to be having a session right after this one at the top of the hour. She'll be talking about low code, no code, no problem, a beginner's guide to Power Platform. I think it'll be great too, because I think it's a perfect follow up to this session and some of the things that we talked about today. So go ahead and follow Chloe on social media. Check out our sessions coming up right next, and hopefully you enjoy that too. But before you leave, again, thank you all so much for being here. I had an amazing time. I hope you all learned a little bit of, interesting stuff, regardless of whether you're, been programming a long time, or maybe you're new to software development and new to the world of programming. I hope you find like the passion and the inspiration to keep you going, and, really find something that you really appreciate. Now, I definitely want you to go ahead and check out this link, aka.ms/Python First Steps. And it'll take you to some really interesting free resources that you could use to continue down your journey of learning how to get started in programming. So thank you all so much. I hope you all have a wonderful Microsoft Ignite. My name is Cecil Phillip again, and I will see you all hopefully very soon. Bye, everybody.